So our time is running short, and we have Mary's hand, and Antigua was put on to say something shortly.
Well, we got about, if since we extended this 10 to 15 minutes, we have about 15 minutes.
To wrap up this.
To wrap up this.
Mary?
Well, I recently rewatched the somewhat schmaltzy but invaluable film, Gandhi. We can forgive Ben Kingsley for being cast in the role. It should have been somebody from India. But anyway, the record created by that film is a nice, short, sweet review of that whole time in history. And I just prefacing what I'm about to say with that because I was so struck at the level of strategic thinking and planning that the group of people, of which he was one, engaged, and how important it is to accomplish those large definitions of nonviolence that you've given us today for a group of people to engage with a larger analysis of what is effective, what is strategic. And so that time and that place, I don't think these are yet there. So as a community, we have to start figuring out how to create those strategic planning times and places for
I'm really glad that you brought that one to the forefront. I mean, so many of these small actions, or medium actions, even large actions, are like one at a time. So acting without a strategic overview could be futile.
And waging nonviolence with tools that we are honing and practicing with. Gandhi talks about experiments with truth and experiments with nonviolence. This is Nonviolent Direct Action 101, and each time I'm in this I learn something. Across the field we're learning about specific techniques of engaging in nonviolent direct action. But
Isn't the comment on this activity, it was for the list?
Yes, but we need entirely to understand that each of us can become leaders in helping us learn how to implement tools and strategies of nonviolence, and to continually bring up this whole idea, because it says that apathy in the face of violence, apathy in the face of injustice is violence, and we are all called to act.
So, encapsulate what you just said, if you can, so I can...
Strategic planning.
Strategic planning, and if we were to use strategic planning on this model here,
which one of these pillars is most likely to go first? Or is that just a big bomb that takes them all out?
There's a long list of things that you would have to have in order to be able to do strategic planning, and all those things together would be focused on whatever that group of people had chosen. And any of those things are going to be something you could choose.
All right,
so
I get that.
It's just on the list of the ways that we prioritize our time and energy. This camp, and I wasn't meaning this workshop, but this entire camp is not at that level.
Right, correct.
So I wasn't talking about this workshop, I was talking about this entire weekend.
Okay.
And there is a woman that has done a lot of systems analysis of how systems work and how you can dissolve systems. And what she says is, of all of these pillars that hold up an unjust structure, probably the one where you can get the most leverage and you have the most likelihood of toppling it and effectively toppling that is the paradigm. Our personal and cultural beliefs that system should exist.
And how do you go about attacking that or taking it out or countering it? Claire, real quickly.
How do you do that?
Yeah,
well,
to the crowd.
I think that the speaking truth to power, begin raising those voices of dissent that say you've got a church sending off young men and women off to war. You might question some of the church people about how they drive Christianity with war making. That might begin to question some of our assumptions. Antigua?
Well, I want to quote Margaret Mead.
Margaret Mead.
She said something like, never question that a small group of dedicated people can make big changes. So I don't think our organization has to be huge.
No.
I think we have to be dedicated and perhaps agree on our goals. But Byron has a different analogy metaphor here. She has a brick wall and they're pulling out bricks here, a brick here, and a brick there.
It's very similar,
There.
very similar.
Yeah.
So, you see the exercise, and you know we could probably spend another hour. But you know, you're talking about ways of approaching, removing these pillars, and the strategic planning, scenario actually is not just an exercise, but it's specific to how do we approach long term, from within our issue group, within our organizations attacking this. I mean, Clare and I are involved with the National War Tax Resistors Coordinating Committee, military industrial complex. If you work for peace, don't pay for war. So
there's a large group of people in this country who see withholding revenue from this unjust structures of government is the way to go. So one whole group, so that there are many people attacking these pillars at various levels. Mary.
Something I just heard about internationally, there are women coming together to hold elections for a parallel government that will be all women.
Oh,
So that if and when others fail, there's one ready to step in.
Where is that? In this country?
No, it's not in this country. I think women in this country are welcome to participate. I just heard about it. You'll have to do some research too.
Well, that brings us to a very important issue here, that as we act to topple the unjust system, simultaneously, perhaps we should be engaged in what Gandhi called the constructive program, to be building the alternative.
Right.
As the Catholic workers say, building the new in the crumbling old system. In the crumble of the old system, you're busy building the new. And that brings us to folks in transition town movements, permaculture movements, folks going out and building their gardens and teaching those skills. All of those are part of works of justice.
So
Those
let-
would be the Sunday stuff.
Yes.
well, there's a few things you wanted to cover.
I think
Fear still stands there very large, though.
The what?
Fear still stands there very
Well,
large.
let's address for a moment, if you would. for a
I
minute,
just have a closing quote.
Before we close this out, I mean, churches, institutional belief, fear. I mean, what kind of strategic approach
Yeah.
in our society do we need to be like working towards to counter this?
I think that a big thing is education about alternatives. I think a lot of people believe what they believe because they think that's the only way,
Yes.
and they have fear of anything that's different. So I think that by educating, because my brain, when I don't understand something, like I said, I just started getting into this. So before, I ignored the issues, because I didn't understand them, I didn't know them. So I think that by getting people to understand and educate them, you can knock down that fear and that belief that this is the only way to go, and by educating them that there's other options that are a lot better. I think that's a major thing to knock down.
One side comment. I mean, is there anyone else that wants to chime in here on this one?
On the issue of fear.
On the issue of countering fear?
I don't want to talk too much, but
No,
I
please, that's all right.
personally think that yes, we can work in community and in our own
A
institutional
little
level.
louder for Antigua, please.
Yes, we can work as community groups and through institutions and movement stuff, but I think that there are a number of modalities, not just one, that work at the individual level, and supporting each other to take the time to do that work in our lives as activists, not seeing it as separate or different to do them. And I could name them off, but I'll just say that there's the broad header is either human liberation or warrior training or whatever. There's different ways that different people do it, but reevaluation counseling, Zen trainings, martial arts, tracking skills, Native American training. There's a bazillion different trainings, but if people don't do them for themselves, they're going to continue to wave in the wind of the bigger society's agenda.
I mean, the rulers, the controllers of society on this planet have been very effective in eliminating so much of this knowledge and making us, having us not even think about that someone else is going to be taking care of us. It's deferred to a higher order, whether it's your your parent, your president, your God, but
Your
someone.
TV.
Pardon?
Your TV.
Your TV, so that they will take care of that. Don't think, just go shop. I find as and actually you can show that, but also have copies of all this. I also, when Claire and I have been on the road in the Southeast, we've realized in order to have some small movement, we have to figure out ways of addressing people, working with people to move them. I mean, there's not as much success unless we move people out of their comfort zones or their sense of security. And this is going to be the very end with some examples.
Just a
That's
few
okay.
of them hanging up here, and we'll be handing out a copy. There are many scholars of nonviolent, applied nonviolent action, and Gene Sharp is one of them. And he has codified 198 methods of nonviolent direct action. And I bet if you took a pen and a checklist, many of you have already been engaging in those actions. And here's another way to look at that. And in closing,
Well, there are oftentimes lots of many ways to access changing the system, and we've been dumbed down through our education through TV. What we're handing out are copies of this longer list. This is, like you said, 198 methods of nonviolent action, and there is like very simple, accessible, holding up a sign in front of a building, all the way through organizing ships to break the blockade of Gaza. They're all nonviolent actions. They are increasing in force and effectiveness, and I suggest that most of us are just now learning that how many ways there are that we haven't tried.
and as we're sitting in this lovely spot that was offered to us for this great retreat weekend by a generous woman, her name is Posey, and she is an Episcopal priest, and she's opened this lovely spot. You can hear the flow of water behind us all weekend long. We've had the flow of this wonderful creek and pond to swim in. It reminds me of a quote of a friend of mine who does a lot of work in nonviolent actions and training, Sanderson Beck. He says, military methods are quick and destructive like fire, but nonviolent action is flowing and nurturing like water. Water nourishes growing things. And for some crazy reason, people say we should fight fire with fire. But does that make sense? Doesn't it make more sense to fight fire with water? The flow of water is the lowest path. It follows the lowest path, but it flows constantly. Constantly, all weekend long, that's been flowing there. It covers up all holes in its path, Antigua adds, and it wears away the hardest of rocks. Persistence in our nonviolence, this gentle flow that is not fighting fire with fire, but bringing a different way to bear, to bring change. That's what nonviolence is about. And thank you all for joining us for this. And Antigua, our great songstress with a great historical understanding of songs of the movement, is going to close us out with a song.